This is Hospitality One-to-One, conversations on the industry. Here's your host, Chris Bennis.
Joining us today is Adam Wallace. Adam is the CEO and founder of Spherical. Adam, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Good to be here.
I'm glad to talk to you. I want to pick your brain about a number of different things. Conversation's about 30 minutes, but we could easily go on longer. We won't, but I got a lot to talk about here. But before we get into what you do, what Spherical is, your background, all that good stuff, I wanted to have us jump into the Hive. Ready to get into the Hive there, Adam?
Let's do it.
All right. Again, as a reminder, the Hive is about a minute or so of fast, rapid-fire questions. Many have absolutely 100% nothing to do with what we're talking about. That's okay. It's just light, fun stuff to get to know Adam. So here we go. You ready for question one?
Let's do it.
First job.
Working at a golf course.
Best vacation.
Remote spot in Dominican Republic.
Favorite hotel.
Rosewood, London.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Favorite movie.
The Dark Knight.
Dark Knight. Vanilla or chocolate?
Chocolate.
Chocolate. Dog or cat?
Dog.
PC or Mac?
Mac. Always.
Always. Favorite holiday?
Christmas.
Call or text?
Call.
Had to think about that one. And then first car.
Volkswagen Jetta.
Volkswagen Jetta.
Yeah. Came a little tricked out. They it was a red Jetta that someone had put rims on and racing pedals, and I was 16, you know. I thought it was very cool.
So did you get pulled over often in the car?
No, I didn't, thankfully. Thankfully.
It's funny. I actually, my first car was my grandma's car. I kid you not. My grandma gave me an Oldsmobile. Yeah, there was no tricked out in that car. Not even close.
And if you did, it wouldn't have gone over well. So.
No. There's not that many tricked out Oldsmobiles anymore. I'll just be honest at this point.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I was a little fun little, if you will, adventure into more about Adam. So what I wanted to do, Adam, I think, I always like to kind of start, if you will, with the background, because everyone, where everyone is today, there's always a journey, and everyone's journey is different. So kind of tell me your story. Yeah,
great. And I'll, give the top level of it all, and then we can dig into other pieces, because I could go on for 30 minutes just on that too. But I grew up with a family in the hotel business. My aunt and uncle own a hotel in New York called the Roger Smith. And so I always went there growing up. It was a 1930s Depression era New York property that my aunt's father had acquired. A lot of real estate in various places, and this was the last remaining one. They had run 13 hotels up the eastern seaboard all the way down to the Hotel Nacional de Cuba. And so in the 30s, having 13 hotels, they were one of the early sort of hotel management companies, if you will. And then they had the Roger Smith, and my uncle, James Knowles, took over running it in the 80s, and he was a painter and a sculptor, artist, really creative, eccentric kind of guy. And so out of college, I went and worked there and did everything from, being put in the union to bus tables and the morning busing shift, and, got to know the hospitality business inside and out. And that was 2006, before YouTube was bought by Google. And we started a video-based blog back then that my uncle was wanting to tell stories about the hotel that were different than just, empty rooms pictures. How do we do advertising that creates intrigue and interest and captivates an audience in different ways? And so we did all kinds of wild shit. We did like really quirky, fun stories about installation and performance artists, and really trying to connect with the community that extended beyond the hotel. So that was 2006 through 9 or so. 2008, we got we're really early on Twitter, and when Twitter was starting to be sort of explosive with an early sort of influencer crowd, and Brian Simpson came along. He was running food and beverage at the Plaza Hotel. I hired him to take over running the restaurant for me, which I was doing at the time, and I switched into a full-time marketing role. And Brian brought with him sort of the early Twitter crowd. He was dating a girl that was one of the first 1,000 users on Twitter, and very active. And we started hosting people in various ways and doing social media meetup events and things like that. One of the more notable people that we were involved with was Gary Vaynerchuk, who we hosted at the time to do Wine Library TV live from the hotel. So this was in his Wine Library days, and we had a corner performance art gallery on the corner of 47th and Lexington in New York, and so he did his live taping of the show there, and I was actually just with him last week for his 4Ds, the Daily Digital Deep Dive, and there's a little bit of a moment that I'll send you the clip of it, but where he was talking about this time at the Roger Smith, and what we did in fact is we put up his brother AJ in a suite at the hotel for a month in trade for a consulting session when AJ was moving to New York to start VaynerMedia. So this was like those first 10 employees of Vayner that were all AJ's friends from college. They all stayed at the hotel, and Gary was saying last week how they were all playing video games at night in the suite and hanging out there and sort of scheming on what they're going to do at Vayner. And so that was fun. So we got to know him early on, and always inspired by his vision for marketing, and a lot of others, Chris Brogan and David Meerman Scott, and a lot of the great marketing thinkers were very involved with us back then. So that kind of put us in, and we became a bit of a case study in hotels at that point, which is kind of, even my team doesn't really know the degree to which that was all a thing, but through 2008 through 11, we were the social media case study for hotels. I spoke at 25 conferences around the world. I was 25 years old, and one of them was in Amsterdam. I spoke at this Enterprise Social 2.0 conference, where I was the only speaker representing a company with less than 50,000 employees. It was big scale industry, and we were this 130 room hotel in New York represented. And not only that, but the pre-conference, the preview to the conference was Google plus the Roger Smith Hotel and a fireside chat, and me with this Google executive. So super interesting. It was like a whole different world, but it gave me my sort of foundations in all of that thinking. And so those were the early days. And then since then, I've really had my head down for 7 years building up Spherical, and started with freelance work, and then hiring. We were doing some destination marketing work, and then hired one person after another. We're at 20 people now, boutique scale agency in Soho, which was really my goal, is to be, not to be the biggest scale agency for hotels out there, but the best within a super specific niche. So we're pretty exclusive to luxury and lifestyle hotels. We do web design, content marketing, social media, SEO, SEM, branding for a specific set of hotels, everything from global social media for Rosewood Hotels and Resorts, and many of their properties, to we did the current global website for Edition, and then a lot of the lifestyle brands have come to us, 60, Proper. We just launched Pally Society out of LA, which is 3 hotels and expanding. So a lot of these hotels that are in that kind of lifestyle, Gansevoort, Arlo, with 2, 3 to 5 hotels, but aspirations to grow. Also management companies, Provenance we're working with, which has 8 hotels out of the Pacific Northwest. They're growing nationwide. And then the 2 biggest hotel operators in New York we've worked with over the years for a long time, Highgate and Hersha, each have 25 hotels here. So, it's a specific clientele. Also Park Hyatt we did, so not to go over all of them, but that's so the lay of the land of the type of work that we've done. And it's been interesting to me in these 5 years or so that, a couple things have happened in the industry, and I talked with Gary about this last week to get his take on it, which is, since back in 2011, a couple major things: consolidation of the OTAs. So, Priceline, Expedia buying everyone else out and having more and more power, and similarly consolidation of the major brands, and the Starwood Marriott merger. And I think that in some ways, that has opened up opportunity for these smaller players, but that are more creative, more innovative, to not just create single properties, but create small brands that have brand affiliation and brand affinity and opportunity for growth. And so I think that this niche of these lifestyle brands that are growing and aspiring to grow in light of this if you want points, you go to Starwood Marriott. If you want an interesting experience and loyal to experience, then there's a whole other world that people are very into and aware of. So that's kind of the background, and then the current.
It's almost like you've gone from one realm to the other, because it started off restaurants, the hotel itself, and then you took this leap, if you will, into marketing. And you took it at a time when, in reality, there was no roadmap. There was nothing out there that said, this is how you do marketing for hotels.
Yeah.
And I guess, my question for you would be, to a hotelier right now, listening or watching this, not having the first clue, define for me, what is the difference between marketing for other industries and what makes the niche marketing for hotels so different?
Well, a lot of things related specific to hotels, and then also related to this kind of changing paradigm as the internet's changed, and also people's the internet. It's not just a technical piece. It's really opening up people's concept of what drives purchasing decisions and what drives desires, and that it's one of my fundamentals, which is not hotel specific, and then I'll get into hotel specific, but is that some of the things David Meerman Scott would always say that holds true, which is nobody cares about the details of your product. It's not so product driven on the marketing piece. Of course, in terms of word of mouth and everything else, you've got to create a great product, no question. But in terms of marketing, it's not just posting ads that here's our product, buy our product. And so for hotels, the traditional hotel marketing has is hey, here's a picture of our empty room, and let's buy advertising off of that and say, hey, here's our room, buy our room. But a couple things that are different in hotels. One is that the consumer buying cycle is not as conducive to being as spontaneous as other things, right? So like if you see an ad for a shirt online, you might say, okay, well, let me buy that shirt, and you can be spontaneous and buy that shirt. If you see an ad for a hotel room in the Bahamas, yes, you might be spontaneous to that, but oftentimes it's more about creating a brand identity, creating loyalty, creating interest and intrigue, so that when you are ready to go to the Bahamas, that place is on your radar. And if you just shove down the throat of your consumer, buy our hotel, buy our hotel, buy our hotel, and don't tell a story, and don't create interest, and don't compel them to want to come there over a longer period of time, and then once they've stayed there, how do you create loyalty over an extended period of time? You're missing the point of particularly in a social media context, in the social media world.
So, I mean, you may have kind of already answered this question, but it's probably worth drilling into. All right, so, a mom and pop, they got a Facebook page, they got a Twitter, Instagram account. It's probably every so often updated, maybe not. They're maybe on TripAdvisor or the other OTAs, of course. Where do you think hoteliers are dropping the ball right now when it comes to social media marketing, when it comes to marketing in general?
I think for one, I totally respect the fact that different hotels have different needs, and I think that it's like you have to say that Rosewood Hotels and Resorts globally, 20 hotels and 20 in the pipeline, and a lot of financial backing to run global ad campaigns and all that is a different scenario than a beautifully run B&B with 10 rooms in in a smaller town. So I don't think that it's one size fits all, and I think that's one thing that that there's going to be realities of that you don't need to do the highest end video production if that's not what you're trying to achieve. So I think that for one, like it's not one size fits all, and it's okay to have, you know, differing approaches, you know, for you know, based on scale. So that's one. But I think that you know, for the smaller properties that you know, have less of a big investment in digital, the foundation is the website. There's no question. And that was one of the things that, you know, when we were starting out, we actually started mostly as a web design and development company, and mostly because I saw a gap in that, even in the market of, you know, New York City, you know, hotel web agencies that were missing the mark. You know, that they give, you know, generic, you know, template websites that weren't keeping up with the times, and that's evolved a bit, but still, the formula is still the same. It's very generic, you know, and sometimes non-functioning hotel website. So I think that's the first piece, and that was the thing. I was one of the challenges I had at Roger Smith, is that we did extraordinarily well at getting buzz and attention and exposure in social, but we were driving people back to a conversion funnel that didn't match up. It didn't have the same level of you know, thoughtfulness, and it wasn't connected. So I think that's, you know, it doesn't matter how much exposure you get if your website can't convert and you can't get direct bookings. That's the first piece of the puzzle. And again, that doesn't need to be the most sophisticated thing ever, but there's a foundation there. Then I'd say that and it may not be what we're thinking I'm gonna go with it, but I think that email marketing is underserved and underutilized, and you know, under thought of, and it's something that actually, you know, we're kind of coming full circle to now a bit, in terms of being a bit more sophisticated from a CRM perspective of, you know, speaking to, if you've got people that have stayed with you before, can you give them interesting, relevant content to share with their network, you know? And, you know, like from a CRM perspective, you know, it's tied into the property management system, you know, people have stayed with you. How do you keep them engaged in compelling ways? That's not just, hey, 10% off a room, 15% off a room. How do you build an audience and do that in an authentic and interesting way? And I think, you know, and then if you're a bit more creative and a bit more playful, and you've got an owner with personality, why not, you know, send a post-stay email that's a video thank you from the owner, or a pre-stay email with events that are happening in the space. So those are areas outside of like the traditional social media answer that I do think are super important. And then another one that's also kind of tied to that, and then social is a huge one, but is blog content. Writing is still a foundation of a lot that we do. It ties a lot into SEO work, SEO tied to content marketing. And so we do a lot with neighborhood guides, events listings, blog posts that are driving non-branded keywords, and also create shareable content for social media. So rather than just saying, here's our rooms page, come to our rooms page and book a room, you know, tell, you know, a story about something that's coming up in the destination in the area, and give that as a compelling, shareable piece of content. So all of those, I think, are important foundations to have. And then on the social side, you know, there's just a whole world within that of opportunity. One thing, you know, related to this event that I went to last week with Gary Vaynerchuk, which was fabulous, of this daily digital deep dive, that I thought was interesting is VaynerMedia, you know, considers himself now very much a digital agency, creative agency, not a social media agency. And the way they break up their different sections and the way they look at it is not social media, then, you know, content marketing, and then, you know, SEO and whatnot. It's very much, it's strategy, creative, influencer marketing, paid media, personal brand was another one that we went over. But I think that's interesting, is they don't say social, even though they're doing things outside of social, but it's not social media is the bucket. It's, hey, what is creative, and what is strategy, and what is, you know, and what are opportunities in paid. So So I think a lot of, and certainly for us, it's been primarily Facebook and Instagram driven at this point. I had a big affinity for Twitter early on, and still am a little bit optimistic that there's opportunities for one-to-one communication there in a way that other channels don't facilitate for community management. But certainly, Zuckerberg's found a way to get the lion's share of the attention at those platforms, and we've been very photography focused in our work. So whereas my previous work was very community management focused, we've been very photography focused. I hired a full-time photographer as our fourth employee, and she's been with us since and doing fabulous work. And all of those channels have evolved to be visual storytelling, and I think that that's super important to be able to tell a compelling narrative in social.
Gary,
a lot of pieces there, but it's all the territory we're playing in. So,
you're bringing up Gary, and he could teach a master class on this, but he obviously is all over the place. Instagram, he's got Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, he's up there, and he's a master at engagement. And I mean, I think from a hotel standpoint, obviously you may not have the VaynerMedia budget, if you will, to be able to afford to do that scale. But there is something to be said for being able to engage. What tips do you have if someone is looking to create some, again, creative media and to spark engagement on any of the platforms?
Yeah, well, so content's definitely the foundation. You can't do anything without first telling a good story. And that's, I think, what was successful about our work back at Roger Smith is that, we were creating interesting stories before anyone, no one was seeing them for a couple of years. And Gary talks about that as well, that like, hey, you got to, keep at it and tell your story in an interesting way. And then find the, connect it with the right audience. So telling a compelling story and creating good content, photography as a foundation, video is important, but certainly, there's a foundation of photography as a starting point that I think is super important. With that, in a hotel context, creating content that's, that goes beyond the traditional product driven shots. It's not just here's our empty room by room. It's not just, here's a, cocktail at our bar. You can pepper in some of that. But one of the things that's been specific about our photo style is that we really like to look at showing the product in the context of how it's experienced. So, and that doesn't mean cheesy lifestyle shots. That means, how can you show some humanity in it and show that, but still in a highly produced way. And I think that, in the world of user generated content and everyone's posting pictures of their hotel experiences, how do you take that as a foundation, but then do it in an elevated way that's still authentic to the platforms? And so we've been doing a lot of that. Our team is making us outrageously jealous, traveling the world with Rosewood. We're doing Mexico and Bermuda and Bahamas and London and Castilian and Babasco and Tuscany. They're about to go on a trip to Asia to Phuket and Laos and Hong Kong, Cambodia. So they're, we're traveling the world, taking pictures of the most amazing hotels in the world. And but we've created an approach there that's really working. And I'd say that then tapping onto that, just a note on the bigger scale of things of like, really luxury and lifestyle, is that there's been an interesting evolution in the, in what a global ad campaign is, that I've been interested in and studying. And, the traditional global ad campaign, similar to the traditional small scale hotel, here's our product. The ad campaign would be, hey, let's do an expensive photo shoot and let's run ads in travel and leisure globally. But there'd be no digital extension to that. There'd be no, ongoing communication of how this ad campaign to buy eyeballs is then engaged with in social channels. And that's been a really interesting thing for us related to Rosewood, is how do we extend the brand identity in a way that is being engaged with, on a day-to-day basis and not just in an ad campaign. So that's been super cool and super interesting. So I'd say for any hotel, that content is the foundation. I think the challenge then from there, once you say, hey, here's a good visual narrative and we're telling a story, is there's a very good chance that if no one knows about you or few people know about you, that no one's going to see that. And so you can't just put good content into the world and expect people to notice it. When people do notice it, they'll engage with it more because you're telling a good story and they'll tell their friends about it. So that will create some organic growth. But the community management side of things, the engaging with others, sharing other people's stories, bringing in, influencers to stay with you that have a network, is super relevant and super compelling. One of the things, we'll lace Gary in throughout here, but one of the things, and I'll send you this clip of what he said about hotels in the session with the questions I asked him. Maybe you can cut that in here or something. But he one of the things he said in the consulting session about 9 years ago that he did with us at the Roger Smith, was he was obsessed with the idea of the perishability of hotel inventory. And the idea that if you don't sell a room tonight, you can't sell it tomorrow, right? Because that's, if you leave empty rooms, and I think that hotel owners and revenue managers and everything get very protective of these unused assets, because they don't want to mess up their RevPAR numbers, or yes, there's a cleaning fee to the room and it's going to cost you $50, $60, $80 to clean the room, depending whatever it is, depending on the hotel. But he was, saying, hey, if you've got 50 rooms going empty every Sunday night in New York, why not leverage those assets and give them away? Give them away to someone that's going to share your story. Give them away to someone that's going to come in and have an audience. So influencer marketing, but oftentimes we're negotiating on influencer contracts with hotels that saying, hey, for this room night, we get this amount of exposure, and you want a compelling value exchange. But I do think that most hotels are much more conservative than they could be in that regard. And if you've got 50 empty rooms and you're a 150 room hotel, why not put 10 people in there that have 10,000 to 100,000 followers on Instagram that are going to post 5 times? That's damn cheap advertising. That's damn cheap exposure. And why not leverage that? And I think that, I think that the hotels have a massive upper hand in the influencer marketing game at the moment. Gary always talks about the underpriced Facebook advertising. I think that there's massive underpriced attention getting other people to talk about you just in exchange for a room that you're not going to use anyways. So that getting other people to tell your story, there's massive opportunity there. And if you're an individual hotel owner, I see a lot of potential with that.
You hit on something I think many hoteliers are not taking into account, because you were talking about, of course, you've got this block of rooms. You know what you want to charge for them, and the hoteliers are more focused on what can they get per cost for this room. You're saying, look at it from a standpoint of that one person that you bring in, you may offer to them either free or at a dirt cheap price. But if they bring along with them all their followers, that one person could generate much more revenue than just one person staying in that room.
Big time. And particularly if it's going to go empty already, And then there's a gradient to that, and like other people, you might say, hey, like this person has a good following. Let's give them a bottle of champagne. Let's give them a fruit plate that they'll take a picture. How do we, incentivize? Let's send them a handwritten note saying, hey, we love following you on Instagram. Look forward to keeping in touch online. Like how do you, if those people are staying with you that are going to have, a following, how do you, bring them in to your, something David Meerman Scott used to say is, point people to your digital doorstep, and then engage with them there. And so how do you take that and say, okay, hey, this person's coming here, give them a handwritten note, say, hey, we'll see you online. We used to do this 8 years ago on Twitter. We'd sign it at Adwall and at RS Hotel, and we give them a bottle of wine, and we'd get, Justine, who had 1 million followers on Twitter at the time, to do a video of the room. And it wasn't it wasn't the typical hotel that she would stay at, but she loved the personal interaction and the whole thing. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there from leveraging that. On a more sophisticated level of it, we're getting into some interesting conversations with CRM companies, like Sendine, for instance, has become a bit of a default in that world, and they have some interesting tools related to social media integration within CRM that we're looking to pilot coming up. And what you can do is you can and it's already built into their tool, but not a lot of people are using it.
Mm-hmm.
What you can do is segment your arrival list in the CRM by social media following and by if they've stayed with you before. And you can automate who goes on the VIP list based on that. So it's not some intern, scouting out, hey, like creeping on everyone. Send a pre-stay email to everyone with more than 10,000 followers on Instagram, automated, tied to your property management system, and send them an added value incentive. And if they're more than 50,000, have the owner, give them something extra special, or when they've stayed with you, then give them a post-stay email saying, hey, stay with us again or share your content. There's all kinds of interesting things. And that starts to scratch up against this, how do you automate some of those more manual processes, but not in a spammy kind of way at all? But how do you, treat different clients differently and deliver them the right, the right communication and the right message?
Well, we're almost out of time, but before we wrap up, I have two final questions here for you. First of which is, all right, break out the crystal ball. I mean, and of course, if you could answer this question with absolute certainty, I'm sure about a gazillion companies would love to talk to you. But if you could look ahead, where do you see creative marketing, social media in general, and hotels going in the next 5 to 10 years, in your opinion?
I think that the fundamentals won't change, and I think that the platforms will, and the usage of the platforms will. I think that under the fundamentals being telling a uniquely interesting story that's going to connect with people in meaningful ways, understanding who your target market is and what they're looking for, and treating different customers differently, and being active in public one-to-one communication is the fundamental shift of what social, why social is different than any other advertising in the last hundreds of years. I think that's the real communication shift, is that there's public dialogue and public engagement in compelling ways rather than just push advertising. And that, and in the early Twitter and Facebook days, the 2008 through 11 days, that was this mega shift in communication as companies are publicly communicating with their audiences. And that's where people are becoming, interested. And I think that will continue to grow. And I think certain companies are still caught in just, hey, how do I push my advertising? And they haven't really looked at, hey, it's not just about pushing advertising, it's about engaging with our audience and communicating with them in compelling ways. And that's what's going to continue to, grow and evolve in the path of where things are going. Technology is going to change. I mean, Gary's obsessed with, the voice search as an evolution. I think that, I think that the social media platforms will evolve and change. There's the stuff with Zuckerberg this week, and all of the complexities of that. People might rebel against Facebook, and then where does that go? And so the platforms will change and evolve and grow. But I think that telling a compelling story. The other thing that I think is foundationally important is realizing that creating strong brand identity, whether you're small or big, supersedes platform. I think that that's often overlooked. So, telling a good story, creating an interesting and relevant brand that people will be compelled to go directly to you, not get lost in, OTAs and OTA commissions of, the more commodity driven transactions. How are people uniquely interested in you? And creating that in a shareable, engaging way to really specific, unique audiences. So I think that stay on those fundamentals, and not get too worried about platforms evolving, and you don't need to be. The hotel industry has never been bleeding edge. It's just never. It's a slow moving beast because it's a real estate business. But there's a lot of opportunity out there for sure.
So bottom line, the takeaway from that is the content's pretty much going to stay relatively the same. It's the platforms that are going to evolve and change as time goes on, pretty much.
Yeah, and the usage, I think the usage of them as well, like you have to adapt, the Instagram stories is a major shift. And so now it's shorter form content. It's more punchy, playful content. I think it all continues to evolve. The intro clips on pre-roll ads on YouTube are now, 3 seconds. You get someone's attention for 3 seconds. So how do you tell a story in 3 seconds? The usage and all of that will continue to evolve and change. But I think that really having a team that is able to articulate your brand and your story in compelling ways and engage with people, that's the foundation is to build off of.
Wow. Well, last question as we wrap up here. If people, this conversation has been far-reaching, very educational, and I know this is one of those conversations, Adam, that will probably generate more questions as people listen to this or
Sure.
watch this. So if people want to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
LinkedIn's great. Adam J. Wallace on LinkedIn. I've been noticing a lot of evolution of content on LinkedIn, so I'm more active there. So that's a good starting point. At Adwall on Instagram. At Spherical on Instagram, SPHRCL. Spherical on Instagram. Those are good spots to find me. Email me as well, adam@spherical.co. Look forward to continuing conversation, and happy to be of help in any way I can.
That's terrific. And those of you who are listening in your car, for example, don't have a pen and paper handy, it's okay. We're actually going to post a link on our website, yourhotelrecruiter.com, with all of Adam's contact information. Adam, great conversation. I appreciate it. It was just really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.